So I think some context or backstory for why we think this would be a fun idea, why two friends should hop on a podcast every weekend and talk about what's going on in their lives and what they're thinking about is because what we found as a commonality between us, a biophysics PhD, on the other hand, a product marketer, is this idea of an open mind. I think we've gone into situations, we've been affected by pretty large, heavy moments in life. And those have helped us come to realize that there's so much indoctrination we face as guys in their 30s. And we want to kind of shed a light onto that and think about help other people guide them on how to navigate some of that. One of the topics that came to mind is really, yeah, shedding this idea of toxic masculinity, right? Like we're told to act a certain way. Even the words we say, and Andres, you can speak, I think, a lot better to this. Even the words we say when we're joking around as guys, they can all become very kind of self-fulfilling prophecies. It's like, oh, you crushed it, or you did this, you didn't do this well. Even the jokes we make really are putting each other down. Yeah, you're killing it. Yeah, so we're putting each other down. Maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah. I think it's funny how with the camera like freezing up. Um I think I think that toxic masculinity is definitely a topic that's worth pursuing. Um I just the word itself, toxic masculinity, to me is kind of uh off-putting. You know, it kind of implies that we are not enough, like, which to me is like the whole issue. That damned if you do, damned if you don't type of thing. If you're not masculine, you're not worthy. If you are too masculine, then you're toxic. So finding a middle ground, a heuristic, like a rule of thumb, is really important. Like, what's a good way to live? How should we approach this life? Especially like you said, guys, in our 30s, we're trying to find a way to live life that is, comfortable, happy, without uh, having to follow the rules that we've been told our whole lives. This indoctrination you mentioned, we've been told that we have to, at least for me in the Latino culture, it's like you have to be a man, you can't cry, you can't show emotions, you can't do this. And as I got older, I realized, like, okay, that doesn't always work. And it's okay for me to ask for help. It's okay for me to share my feelings. It's okay for me to be honest. Yeah, I'm not sure what you think about that.
Yeah, it's a good point that like addressing the label to it all of a sudden makes it confusing. Like, what is toxic masculinity? What's toxic about it? And then on the other hand, yeah, like, are you not manly enough if you're not showing your masculinity and demonstrating it? I think that's a really good point, and that's part of the issue as well, right? Like we are indoctrinated with all these different beliefs. You mentioned not being able to cry. For me, it was, yeah, being able to provide, and like it's so different across cultures, right? So um, growing up, for me, it was definitely academic excellence, right? If you could do well in school, do get good grades, then you would be on your path to providing for a family, and that means you're doing good as a man. However, if you look at American culture, it's quite different, right? Can you build? Can you build with tools? Can you take care of smaller issues? And I noticed that growing up, like those skills weren't something that like we talked about much. It was something that I kind of picked up on my own as I entered the school of hard knocks and left my house and decided to kind of just go at it alone. But yeah, I think culture also impacts how we approach approach these types of labels and what they mean to each person.
When do you think was the moment where you realized you were kind of playing a game with rules that didn't make sense?
It's a good question. I think it was honestly funny enough. I think I have a really good answer to that. Potentially because I do therapy every week or so, um, and I think it was 17 years old because I had like done. Kumon and things like that after school. Let me explain and backtrack. Kumon is like an after school accelerated learning program. And I would go to school, come back, like get a snack, and then my mom and I would drive straight to this Kumon facility, and like I would do more math and reading. But what I realized is it was forced on me. I was naturally curious. But the problem was like it was very much like, all right, go, 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 go up to your 21, then you can be an engineer, then you can be a businessman. And like basically there was like this path was like charted for me. I didn't have much say in it. It was just kind of done there. Now, I don't think it's fair to like blame my parents, right? Like that's how they were taught. And that made sense as immigrants to like focus on these types of things. But yeah, did it make me feel like, wow, I'm literally playing in someone else's game? Yes. And it made it very difficult to understand what do I want to do? What is my inner child telling me to work on? What's going to keep me curious enough to stay motivated at the 40-year-old mark, at the 70-year-old mark? Because that's where I think the greatest success comes from. Um, Along that path, and then I'll shut up, was finding this book, The Artist's Way. That didn't come till I was like in my mid 20s, but um, as I started to become aware that I was playing someone else's game and someone had already written the story for me, I realized like I have to unwire all of that now and kind of undo that, start thinking for myself even deeper. And that book really helped me think through, okay, like there is my subconscious, there are the thoughts that never make it to the forefront of my creativity of what I do as a human because they're trapped. They're trapped very deeply in on under this like surface of, hey, you need to do this to impress others. You know, what is society going to say? What is everyone around you going to say if you don't do well in school and perform? Um, so maybe that's a good thread we can pull on.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you talk about your life almost like a book that's pre-written, or at least you're told that it's pre-written and you have to go down this route. And then as you get older, you discover resources like the Artist's Way you mentioned that tell you that it's not necessarily pre-written. And in my case, I've delved into science and I've studied a lot of science. So I've also been very curious, but I never had that push from my parents in the same way you did. I think they were just happy if I was doing okay. But I've always pulled that thread of curiosity wherever it takes me. And part of it is explaining or predicting what's going to happen next. In my opinion, science is all about prediction and predicting and explaining our reality. And when you stop trying to predict what's going to happen, you stop trying to realize what that book that you've been told your life is going to be uh, is like. Where you stop trying to predict that book, you can start living in the moment. You can start living in the now and realizing that it's okay to not know what's going to happen next. It's okay to not know how things are going to work out, why they have to work out. You can just be here, be now. And for me, when I read The Artist's Way, I found it last year actually. And that opened me up to realizing that I don't have to know everything. I can just relax, let it happen. I can know that there are other forces at play. When I say that, I'm purposely vague. Uh, there, there are other forces at play, whether it be, the universe, other people around me that can make things work. It doesn't have to all come from from me, and I don't have to write a book uh, in advance to know what's going to happen. And like you said, our parents, they just wanted the best for us. And you can just all you have to do is be grateful for that. Uh, I think as a teenager and maybe earlier 20s, uh, there could be some resentment for the way that our parents brought us up, especially both of us come from immigrant families, and they jumped into this whole rule set that is completely different from what they were brought up with, and they're trying to play this game. They don't know what's going on, and so we are kind of in this weird middle ground to try to figure it out while they're trying to make sure they provide what's best for us. And you can see that, I mean, people who have several generations of family playing this game in the United States, they're situation or their their upbringing is completely different. They have a different life, uh, and it's very clear. I mean, that's why uh, there are people trying to push certain immigrant family development projects, for example, which you can obviously speak more about that if you want. But yeah, the artist way for me was also uh, a major turning point in realizing that I don't have to do this on my own.
Yeah. Um, I like that a lot. Yeah, I like collaborating on projects and others, with others, and just yeah, really just even calling to the universe, right? Like you are writing, you're talking about your subconscious, you're just letting thoughts come to you versus always feeling like you have to put, pen to paper and kind of live in this state of continuous doubt, right? It's like, what is the answer? There's always like there is a question in your head and you have to find the answer. Whereas leaving it open ended actually leaves room for more nuance and for more questioning and inquiry.
So, for the people that don't know, what is the artist way?
I was hoping you'd get to that. So The Artist Way is a book that Andres and I both read. What's interesting is that I read it when I was in my 20s. And then I was on vacation with Andres. We met up in Brazil. And he was like, "Hey, I've been reading this book. You should check it out." And lo and behold, he pulls out the same exact book I read 5 years ago. But of course, as everyone knows, books have different impacts at different parts of life. So as I read it again, I really got tons of information, and I think it came at the perfect time, which is always strange how that works. Now, all of that blabber to get into what the book actually does. Um, it's written by a lady named Julia Cameron, and it takes people through how to uncover the artist within each of us. So I think we are taught to believe we are engineers, doctors, everything else, and that we are not artists, right? When we're 7 years old, you go to art class and you're told, hey, either you're naturally gifted or you're not. Um, in this book, she basically kind of uh, demystifies that and kind of shows how it's a myth, how all of us are actually artists. And each chapter is about different practices. So it's not just like, here's the problem, now you go solve it. She actually talks about how to, go about this. Some of the greatest writers of all time have done this practice called morning pages, where they write stream of consciousness for a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of pages. And that gives them clarity. And I'll let you speak to this, Andres, but like one of the bigger principles in that is you're not trying to control the outcome. You're not trying to produce great work. It is very much just your place, your hive to have this inner dialogue, and wherever it takes you goes. And I'm not sure if Andres is going to get to it, so I really want to make sure that we do. Andres has this really cool hobby of this practice where he now writes short stories, which I think is a very cool manifestation of what morning pages could be.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about the artist way. So, in the book, she talks about being engaged with your present moment. Talks about things like going on walks, and when you go on walks, notice little details. She talks about how she used to get letters from her grandmother, and in the letters, she would write all sorts of details about the lizards in her backyard, the flowers blooming, and just paying attention to the details that are in your life. And I think that's a big part of it, just being present, being in the moment. And it reminds me of this archetype. I think Carl Jung came up with it, which is the hero versus the artist archetype, where the hero is always trying to overcome larger and larger obstacles. They find the large dragon, and behind that dragon, there is a pile of gold. They slay the dragon, and then they finally get the gold. And what they're left with is a yearning for another challenge. So they find an even bigger dragon. Behind that dragon, there's a princess. And then once again, they find an even bigger dragon. Behind that, there's the kingdom and more dragons. While the artist, as opposed to the hero, artist realizes that there are infinitely many barriers, dragons, obstacles, whatever you want to call them, and that everything they need to create is within them. All they need to do is look within and unleash the infinite possibilities that are within them to create, to do anything. I mean, if you want to paint, if you want to draw, you can just pick up a pencil, and even if it's bad, you can still create something. And it doesn't have to be good. I like to think of what the statue of David, Michelangelo said, I didn't make the statue of David, I merely released them from the block. So whenever we start making any project or any artistic endeavor, we start off with a very coarse idea, like a very rough draft, and we begin to chisel at it and make it finer and finer and finer. Similar with my stories. Whenever I come up with the story, it'll be a really rough, loose idea, and then I'll repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and tell the story multiple times. And every time I tell the story, new details pop up. I don't know where those details come from; they just show up. But that's just that's just how it is. Over time, uh, it begins to become more and uh, more detailed.
Yeah, to respond to your point about the statue of David, I think that's a great example, because what comes to mind for me when you say that is this idea of urgency. Like anytime I have an idea, I want to attack it, right? It's like, okay, here's the idea. How do I turn this into a business? What does the next 3-year plan look like? And instead, if you give it some time to just stew in your brain, then you have a chance to really let it formulate in a natural way. Almost let that serendipity happen. That is that we kind of ignore, right? It's like, hey, you had this idea, all of a sudden you meet this person who can help you enable this. He talks to the right people. She is a professor in this specific topic. And then you start to meet them, and that builds this like amazing momentum. And honestly, to me, like this excitement of like, wow, I must be headed in the right direction. Um, Almost a feeling of like the universe is right there for you. You realize that in those moments. But I realize when I'm stressed or when I'm trying to force something to happen in a certain amount of time, all of a sudden that goes away. You don't see the serendipity. You aren't grateful for those moments because you're like, yeah, like this was you feel like you're the one chasing everything. Whereas there's no belief in the fact that some of this can actually come to you if you uh, attract instead of chasing.
Yeah, I really love that phrase. Attract, don't chase. I think this whole idea of urgency and serendipity is really rooted in the desire to control the outcome. The more you try to control your destiny, you read the book out, the less it works out that way. I think it was Robert Frost who said, "The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry." It's a very famous phrase. And I think it really resonates with me because every time I try to control my outcome, it doesn't go how I planned. But the more I relax and I say, it's okay, things are going to work out. I don't have to know how they're going to work out, why they're going to work out. I know they're just going to work out. They work out. Things just work out. You try to maintain that mindset that it's okay for you to not know how things are going to go. And to me, and I've thought about this a lot. Uh, so before I tell you like exactly what I mean is, over the past year, I've traveled the world. So I went around the entire planet, and I spent a lot of time on my own just thinking about these things and thinking about, why do I want to control my future? Why do I want to know what's going to happen next? Why do I feel this desire to know what's going to happen and how can I control it? Like, why do I want money? Why do I want this and that? And all of that stems from a place of scarcity, from a place of lack, from a place of, I don't have that thing now. So I'm operating from a place of lack. So when you learn to operate from a place of abundance, from a place of you have that thing, you start to act like the person that already has it. As I travel the world, I asked this question to a lot of people. I said, if you were a trillionaire, the world's richest person, what would you do And I'd say you're so rich that you bought the moon, you bought all the private jets, all the private everything, houses, mansions, boats, yachts, Michelin star restaurants. You've traveled the world. What would you do with your time? And an answer I often got was, oh, I would invest my money into. I say, no, you don't have to invest anymore because you already have all the money. You don't have to worry about the future anymore. You're so rich that you don't have to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. You can just focus on whatever desires you have at this moment. And then people would suddenly start telling me different things. Like they say things like, oh, I'd start a dog shelter so I can take care of dogs because I love dogs. Or I would dedicate my time to pottery. I want to do ceramics. I want to write stories. I want to draw. I want to DJ. I want to pursue these things that I think would bring me joy. Once I have the money, then I can do those things. But really, you can. I believe in this idea that once you have the money, sure, you can do those things. But if you do those things, maybe the money will come. So I believe that this arrow is actually bidirectional, and this is a heuristic. Obviously, it's not like it might not be a set in stone thing that you have to do, but I believe that when you pursue the interests that make you happy and bring you to this moment, they will bring you closer to your dreams. And you are no longer operating from a place of lack, from a place of scarcity. You're operating from the place of I can do what I want. I can act as if I were a trillionaire. I can act as if I already have everything. I'm doing the thing I wanted. Now, I don't have to wait for something else to bring it to me. And in that sense, you're acting more like the artist archetype rather than the hero. You're not trying to overcome obstacles to get a thing. You're just doing the thing. It's here already with you.
Absolutely. I think that's super powerful and actually is a great segue. I think one of the things Andres and I want to do is as part of this kind of exercise is that we don't have all the answers, right? No one does, but I think often on podcasts and sometimes when I read, someone's telling you that they know the answers and we don't have them. We are just exploring and hopefully providing some heuristics, some rules of thumb to guide whoever's listening to this, how they might go about thinking about something. So I think Andres created a perfect one that I've actually used myself. And that is, what would you do if you were a trillionaire? What would you, how would you act? What things would you pursue? I think that's a great question potentially to leave the audience with. I don't know if there's any focus or anything you'd add to that, Andres.
Well, I think since, like you said, we don't have the answers. And if there are things that other people want to discuss or topics that they find interesting, let us know. Because we're both on a mission to live our best lives. And part of that is discussing it and sharing it with the world, what we've found. And also I want to say I didn't come up with this trillionaire thing. I've adapted it from other sources. But really, I agree with you, Sid. Ask yourself the question, what would you do if you had everything you wanted? What would you really do? And even if you wanted to cure diseases, this is another one I heard a lot. If you wanted to cure cancer, you could delegate that money to some other people. You can delegate responsibilities to other people. What would you do selfishly on your own time?